Senate in the 2014 election as a challenger against the incumbent. Graduate of Mississippi State University. She is a 24-year resident of Clallam County. Most of those years spent as a business owner, as an architect. And as an architect, she completed more than 250 projects in this county, with about 65% of those being private homes. Anyway, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Mary Ellen Winborn.
Does that work?
Can we go? How about we turn this up? Yeah, we'll turn a little bit more here. I think it's, yeah. Yeah, we got our engineer here.
Now? Testing.
Are you sure it's on?
There you go. Yeah,
I know.
on. There you go. Right now. See if that's on.
Just hold it right up to your mouth.
Oh, there we are. There we are.
Jen, it's just like...
Okay. All right. Thank you for having me here today. And when John asked me to speak, he asked me to talk about the changes that I've made in the department. And so what I thought I would do is just give you an overview and maybe talk about, kind of integrate the changes in the program. I was going to tell you a little bit about myself, but John has already done that. So, so I'll go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, so all or most of you know that this is an elected position. And have you ever asked yourself, what does it mean to be an elected official? Well, I had to ask myself that about 2 years ago. And thank goodness the state of Washington has a newly elected official conference. In 4 days, it's all you need to know about being an elected official. However, they didn't have a session for community development directors, but they had sessions for auditors, coroners, treasurers, prosecuting attorneys, and commissioners, but no DCD sessions. So they put me in with the commissioners, which really made a lot of sense because a lot of the questions I get are the same questions that other commissioners in other counties get because so many people are interested in land use, and that's where a lot of conflicts come up. We learned about public process, public records, marijuana, legal guidelines, strategic planning, and my favorite, appearance of fairness, how to stay off the front page of the newspaper. Let's see.
I was just doing that. A short order in here.
Okay. So most of you know about the Home Rule Charter. That's our county constitution, and in November 2002, it was amended to make the Community Development Director an elected position. And I'm the fourth of a 4-year term. So here's the organizational chart of the department, and one of the first changes that I did make in the department was hire a code enforcement officer. First of all, there's 5 divisions in the department: a building division, administration, code enforcement, current planning, long-range planning, and a lead entity, but that's really a separate term. But the first thing I did was hire a code enforcement officer, and the code enforcement was in the sheriff's department to start with, and the sheriff, I asked him if we could put it in the Department of Community Development because that's really where it belongs. He was kind of limping along in the sheriff's department, but we deal with all kind of other issues that it makes sense to have here. So he said, sure, you can have it. Then the second thing was hiring a building official, fire marshal, which really helped the organizational chart because before the director had 9 people reporting to 1 person, and there's only 22 people in the department. So on the org chart, you see that the public, you're my boss. I've had people say, but really, who is your boss? And I'm like, you're my boss. I mean, you're it. And they're like, no, is Jim Jones your boss? I'm like, no. The commissioners, no. The public, that is who my boss is. That's who I answer to. So let's see. So there's current planning, long-range planning, okay, and then the lead entity. The lead entity, even though that the planner is in DCD, really it's a planner coordinator. Really, there's a technical team and a policy team that actually direct what she does. She's just there for personnel issues. So, what does the Department of Community Development do? A lot. Okay, the building division. One of the plans that I made first off was building permits. People were putting building permits in, and they were putting them in incomplete, and they were asking us to be responsible for getting the permits out on time. Well, if you don't have all the information available, you can't do a good plan review, and the plans examiners were getting the packets and they weren't complete, and so they were just stacking up. So it really wasn't getting anybody in line for anything. It was just holding up progress. So the building department and the building division, we're responsible for building permits, plans inspections, addressing building official duties, and fire marshal duties. And the fire marshal sets the burn down as well. So next. Current planning. Land use issues, zoning issues, development permits, site placement, critical area permits, FEMA regulations, and short plats, and also conditional use permits, just to name a few things. The list goes on. Okay, next. Long-range planning. Clallam County, this is a map of Clallam County, our long-range planning map. We have the Sequim Dungeness area, the Port Angeles area, the Straight View area, and the Western Region planning area. And this is a map of our shoreline master plan to show the jurisdiction of the shoreline master plan. And imagine this being the Strait of Juan de Fuca up here. So all the shoreline along the Strait of Juan de Fuca is part of the jurisdiction. All the rivers and streams over 20 CFM, all the associated wetlands with all those rivers and streams, along with Lake Pleasant and Lake Sutherland, but not Lake Crescent because that's in the national park. And then another change that happened when I was in office is the marijuana ordinance. It took 8 months to get the ordinance passed. That's another thing I've had to learn. It takes a long time to get things done in government. Everything in black, marijuana is allowed at some capacity, whether it's processing, producing, or retail. Everything in white, it's not allowed. And then there are a few areas that are gray that you can't see on the slide. Marijuana is allowed with a conditional use permit process. That would be in the ag retention zone. You have to have over 15 acres and some development standards, and then it'd still go through a conditional use permit process. This was a very contentious ordeal, but now it's very peaceful, and it's very predictable. The people come in, they know what they can do and what they can't do, and there's just no more conflict over it. So it's worked out really well. Another thing that long-range planning does is some really long-term, long-lasting projects. This is the Dungeness River. There's a river levee setback project. This is the levee that's going to be moved. This is Three Crabs area right here. So this levee is going to be moved over in this area. So 110 acres of floodplain is going to be restored right in this area here. So, next. Code enforcement. Barb McFall, she came to us from the city of Port Angeles. She was a sergeant there for 16 years, and she's been learning all about land use, junk vehicles, critical areas, buffers, open sewage, and building without permits. So, next. So this is a built without permit. The person thought that they were building a 400 square foot exempt building, but buildings that are going to be that someone's going to live in, they do have to be built to code. And if you look at this building, there's no header above the window.
What are you looking at me for?
Did you build that building?
These rafters are like 2 by 4. By code, they have to be at least 2 by 12 to get insulation in them. And this floor system is a 2 by 6. It has to be at least a 2 by 12 to span 20 feet like it's doing. So it just had problem after problem after problem. But the good news is that Habitat for Humanities came out and helped him disassemble the building and hopefully will help him put it back. He said that he was using it to practice for when he built his piano. You can bang on a piano all day long, but if you don't know the notes, it's not going to be any good practice. Okay.
Can we use that excuse?
So, just imagine RVs, palm trees, and beach chairs along Freshwater Beach Bay. Last summer, the heat conjured up this whole idea. You can move beach logs all day long, but you cannot produce a new use out on the beach and put an RV out there and plant palm trees and a flagpole and lawn chairs. Yeah, that's what someone thought they could do.
Really?
Yes, we're still working on this. We're almost done. Like I said, it takes a long time. It takes about 7 or 8 months to get something like this resolved. Next.
My neighbor sure.
Well, you may say, shouldn't people be able to do what they want to on their own property? Well, yes and no. If there's open sewage, that's a public health problem. And if there's solid waste, that's a public health problem. And if it's next to a stream or a creek, which this one is, that's a health water problem. And obviously, it's an aesthetic problem. So Barb has been working with these owners to try to get this cleaned up and get some junk vehicles off the property. And you know, she has to come at them with a work plan and just to make sure a little bit's done all the time, because we always try to get voluntary compliance. And the road department has been really helpful. They have some waivers to remove garbage and put it in the Blue Mountain transfer station, so that's been real helpful. So she's just been really good at getting a lot of different people to do different things to come together to help some of these problems. Okay, so next. So this is another thing of how community agency and government collaboration come together. Community development is so far-reaching, and we have a marine resource component to community development. There's the MRC, the Clallam County MRC. There's a $75,000 grant that houses this committee. It's 8 members. And then there's the North Pacific Coast Marine Resource Committee. It's out on the west end, and we have a county representative that represents us there, and also Jefferson County is involved in that one too. So we combine our resources. Next. Then we have salmon restoration. There's a lead entity that looks at this is on the west end. This represents the RIA 20, the Water Resource Inventory area, which is out on the west end, and they have all types of salmon restoration projects out there. And you have these two, this LEG and this TRG committee, that they grade the projects to see which ones will get the funding. And the funding comes from the West Coast Sustainable Salmon Partnership. Then housed in Clallam County, when I showed you over on the organizational chart, is the North Olympic Peninsula lead entity. Maybe you've heard of NOPL. And that's where a lot of other projects are graded and decided on what that one project, the Dungeness River project, the levee setback, that was funded through NOPL, which was funded through the Puget Sound Acquisition and Restoration PSAR organization. And one of the things that I did is I moved the lead entity out of long-range planning because of that appearance of fairness, because the lead entity actually decides who gets the projects. When the county goes for those projects, we don't need them in the same room together, so it doesn't look very good. So then the Lake Ozette Sockeye Steering Committee, sockeye was on the endangered species list several years ago. It got off, but it's back on again. So this committee meets 4 times a year out on the west end. And then there's the Dungeness River Management Team that has 16 members and 16 entities that come together once a month and exchange information. It's a very interesting meeting to go to. We have 2 members from Clallam County on that, the PUD's representation on that, the Clallam tribe, there's a couple of farmers that are on it, and just the Protect Peninsula Futures on it. So there's a wide range of people that are represented on that. So next. Then we have land use and building. We have the Planning Commission. That's a group of very dedicated people that meet twice a month. They're non-commissioners. Usually the meetings run from 2.5 to 3 hours. They vet everything that goes through the department before it goes to the commissioners, because still before something becomes an ordinance or becomes an act, it has to go through the commissioners to be approved. So we have the Permit Advisory Board. There's 14 members from the building community on the Permit Advisory Board. They bring all kind of building questions or problems or concerns together at that meeting. Then there's the Carlsberg Advisory Committee, and they're on call right now, but they've been in existence for years, and they decided what the urban growth area around Carlsberg was and the visioning of Carlsberg, and they're pretty much done with that now, and that's going to be part of our comprehensive plan update that's due this June. And then the information that they have come up with, they've taken it to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has vetted it and made some amendments, and they've taken it back to the Carlsberg Advisory Council, and they really appreciated the comments. So they've worked very well together. So it's been really nice. So who and what is the Department of Community Development? Well, at the core, it is a group of really talented, dependable people that are here to help you make your dreams come true in a safe, healthy environment while respecting our natural resources. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
How many staff is there throughout your department that run all these things? There's an awful lot of background, everyday work and so on. How many staff do you have total?
22.
22 people?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work for 22 people.
It is. It is. I mean, I was amazed at how it just does not stop. From the time you walk in the door to the end of the day, it does not stop. It's constant.
It's big of that.
It does. It really does. It's great.
A couple of years ago, I heard some talk about the possibility of looking at new or additional county stormwater runoff regulations. And if you can comment on whether you see anything coming down the pike, if there are any specific problems that you see that are not being addressed appropriately by current regulations that would require additional regulations, where does that stand?
Well, we got it. Before I was there was a grant from the Department of Ecology to work on our own stormwater manual. And all that work has been done. There's been a small project manual that's also been done that would address probably 90% of the buildings in the county. So it's all the work's there, clearing and grading ordinances there, but for some reason it got hung up in 2014 and got pulled. So it hasn't gone through the process with the Planning Commission and the commissioners. And it is something that's really important, because if we don't make our stormwater manual active, then we will be obligated to use ecology stormwater manual. So.
Now I understand there are some rules already, because when I did some development of some parcels, there certainly were rules when I built additional driveways for runoff that I had to do very specific things that were required. Can you just go into what additional things would be required under whatever was come up with under that grant or what ecology would impose and what the problems are that would address that are not adequately addressed today by the way we're doing
Okay,
things now?
well, today, if it's a private residence, you can either do a dry well or you can do an engineered drainage plan. There's nothing in between. A dry well, you know, you just dig a hole and you fill it full of gravel and the runoff from your roof goes into that hole. Well, some soils aren't, you know, suitable for that. So you'd have to go and have an engineered drainage plan, which can cost a lot of money and that may not be necessary. The small project manual, what it does, anything with 5,000 square feet or less, there's a myriad of options that you can do. Some low impact development, some planting, because sometimes you can do planting, you can do a bioswale where it's kind of a ditch that has certain kind of plants in it that are filtering. Or you can do a dry well, or let's see, there's several different options that you can do in that small project manual. So that's going to be really helpful because it's going to actually work instead of, and you can do it. You can go through the manual and you can decide what kind of plants you want to use. You can decide how you want to treat that runoff. So, and actually the courthouse just did a stormwater retrofit. I don't know if you noticed all the new landscaping around the courthouse that has all these different kind of components in it, different ways to treat stormwater runoff. So, ecology, one of the things that used to, an engineer could do a calculation to figure out what the stormwater runoff was going to be, how much retention or whatever they had to use. But now, ecology, they just put the number in a box and they can't check their numbers. And so sometimes it's, they have to do, like a project might have to do 20% of the project cost might be stormwater because of this ecology method of doing things. So we had a guy from ecology come see us because the ecology put us on the list for their stormwater. They want us to, they put us on their near-term action list to have to deal with stormwater. So we're going to have to do it, but they're willing to work with us so we can do our own manual based on our waterfall and our type of soils and things like that. So is that answer?
Is that what's going on at McDonald's?
Yes, that's, can you imagine how much that must cost? Those are like pre-development type, yes, urban type ways to deal with stormwater, and we don't have that, those kind of issues.
How many gallon tank was that at McDonald's?
I have no idea.
That'd be at least 10,000 gallons.
It's huge. So,
At least.
The marijuana map was very interesting. Could you address some of the planning and maybe political things that happened to generate that map?
well, were you involved in it at all? Did
Not
you?
at all.
Not at all. Okay.
I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Just one. Okay.
But it's an interesting political.
A lot. People decided they did not want it in their neighborhoods.
Yes.
So everything that was in white was mostly in the Squim area and some of Port Angeles area and some of the neighborhoods. So residential neighborhoods, residential zones were taken out of, you know, any place where you can do the processing or the production or the retail. So residential was out. And then all the industrial and commercial, it was allowed. But then this ag retention zone, because people say, well, is it agriculture, is it not? The farmers should be able to make some extra money. That's what one of the commissioners wanted that year, so he asked us to go to the Ag Commission and talk to them, and they would like to have it at some capacity. So we went back to the Planning Commission with that idea, and the Planning Commission vetted it. And it was not, I mean, a couple of the planning commissioners walked out because they were not happy with the way things were going. But then we all got together on the same page again and figured it out, and that's why it's the only conditional use permit that there is, because that gives every area, even because some of these ag zones are in residential areas, so it gives those people the way to comment on what's going on in their neighborhoods. So.
Well, there's some discussion going on through the Soil Conservation Service and SQUIM and et cetera about creating a reservoir
Yes.
up the Dungeness.
Yes.
Yep, to be figured out exactly what's happening? Are you or your department involved at all in that process?
Well, we would be permitting the process, so I've been to some of the meetings on it. It'd be like 88 acres
Yeah,
of,
it's going to be a fairly large
very large.
reservoir lake there. Is it possible to get the information into the equation to make that a community-type lake with swimming, fishing, all of the recreational activities that people would like to do on an area like that, and get that into the equation if that goes forward?
Yes, that's been talked about quite a bit. And maybe even a low-impact development neighborhood, low water use. That'll really help with stormwater management in the swim area too. So it can do quite a bit of things. Recharge the aquifer, irrigate.
Very good.
Can you talk a little bit about your code enforcement effort and what areas you decide to focus on and what triggers various actions? And in particular, you might mention something about the Meals Initiative.
Code enforcement hasn't been in DCD for 4 years, and so when we brought it back into DCD, we decided there was such a backlog that all we've done this past year is just taken complaints. So we've gone out and addressed complaints. And that gave Barb the opportunity to learn all the different aspects of code enforcement. As far as Gales Edition goes, I mean, we really haven't gotten any complaints from there. There is way more out there than I ever thought there was, really, to deal with. The one thing that I'd like to get on board to deal with is our Highway 101 corridor. There's some issues on that corridor. And that would benefit everybody. Everybody would see some results from that. So we're going to start to focus on that.
Does it take a complaint to initiate action?
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Is that online?
Yes, there is an application online, but you can call. It can be anonymous. So.
I own some property on the highway. And the sewer system was supposed to be on the south side. Apparently something happened and they went down by Safeway instead. My property is about $125,000 to $150,000 away from the sewer system. I have to pay for it if I want it on my property. I have to go up from Pioneer Street up to my property, which borders the school property and all that. Is there any plans of ever putting the sewer system on the south side of the highway?
No. You're talking about the
So I've
Carlsberg?
been, you know what?
Monroe Road.
Because it was supposed to come across Monroe Road on the south side. That's the plan.
And the cemetery.
Well, the reason that I'm saying no is because I know down by the, and so I don't think that they'd go across the road and go back up again, but I know that they have to go under the road at Taylor Cutoff Road. Is that where you're talking about?
No.
Where's Monroe?
Wait,
By the-
you're talking about here, this, okay.
Yeah, right
Oh,
here,
not the,
by the city.
yeah, that's a city. That's a city. I don't know anything about that.
It's still county.
It's the city sewer and it's the city, I just don't know anything about it. I'm sorry, I can find out.
Yeah, it's still county.
Right.
Taxes, we don't
You
cater
don't-
to the city.
So you don't pay this, you don't, what?
I don't answer to the city at all.
Okay,
That's why I moved out of the city to the
Okay.
county.
okay, well, I'll look
Enough
into that.
regulations,
I don't know anything about it, I'm
the county
sorry.
has regulations, and then the city put more on top. Well, I built my property and everything on outside of the county. I mean, outside the city. And I paid for the property. Because my property on the outside of the city and still be on the highway, you pay for it dearly.
Okay,
And we were promised that we'd have a sewer system on that side. Sutler changed his mind there somewhere. I think it was dollar signs, but I can't prove that. But
And
that's
that-
what I think it is. But there's no plans.
not that I know of. So, but I'll look into that because I really,
Talk to the commissioners, huh? They probably don't have any plans neither. Nobody has any plans.
I have a friend that has a backhoe, Stanley.
I'm not really clear on
Well,
whose
it
jurisdiction
costs over
it is.
$100,000 to go under a highway. $125,000 in fact.
Wow.
And I got a few acres there I would like to have sewer on it. Right now I got a total of 5 septics. And if you guys are gonna permit this, or somebody's gonna start making me pay permits, I mean, checks and all that,
Well, let me
I
look
better
into
go
it.
back to work, huh?
Time to come out of retirement, Stan.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's awful.
Okay. Questions?
Yes. Oh, wait.
So, many of you may know that Jim Jones has been the county's sitting board member on the Chamber of Commerce Board for about 14 years, I think. And as this group knows, the board was taking a look at our term limits and that type of thing, which is why we had now Kai on the board, which is a great thing. But the other seat that needed to be term limit refreshed was the county seat. And so I'm announcing that Mary Ellen is now the county board member on the Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to the Chamber of Commerce board.
Thank you.
You don't have enough to do now?
Looks like you have, as far as ecology mandates go, you have on your plate, obviously, the shoreline master plan, and you will have on your plate soon, sort of is there already, the stormwater runoff. Are there any other ecology mandates that you think are out there coming down the pike that you expect for the remainder of your term you're going to have to deal with in some fashion, and what would those be? I mean, are there things like the growth management plan updates, critical areas ordinances? Are there any things that are going to be happening over the next 3 years that you see?
Okay, well, I will, let me back up just a little bit. There is a stormwater component to the shoreline master plan, so that's one thing that's kind of given us a little incentive to fold that into the shoreline master plan. So that's something. Critical areas, we haven't been shown that we were in violation of anything except for this ongoing agriculture. Some of the farmers have been farming really close to some of the streams, and they're encroaching in the buffers, and that's okay as long as they don't encroach more. So that's the only critical areas issue that has come up, and that came to us from the Protect Peninsula Futures. That was a lawsuit that came to us. But there's not a mandate right now about the critical areas ordinance, but that's a possibility. But I would prefer not to open that up myself, because I think our critical area ordinance is fine as long as we implement it the way it's supposed to be implemented, and as long as we do code enforcement. I mean, code enforcement to me is what's holding the whole department together, because you know, we can make rules and tell you have to do things all day long, but if you don't do them, what good does that do? You know?
Growth management plan, that's also fine as is for the foreseeable future?
The growth management plan, our 20-year update is due in June, and so we're folding like that Carlsberg urban growth area and the zoning in it. That's going to be one of the things that's going to go into the comprehensive plan. Every year we're able to amend the comprehensive plan, and so we can put other things into it as need be. So every year we can do that. And there's some things that we may. I mean, the way it's been done in the past, it's all been what's mandated by the state, but you can also, the prosecuting attorney may not like this too much, but you can actually do other things too and be proactive and do good things, even though they're not just mandated. But that opens you up possibly to some lawsuits. That's what the problem is. Is that accurate?
Really good questions. What's your vision? You know, you got into the job with a specific vision, I think, for it. How do you feel now? It's almost 2 years now into the job.
I feel good about it. The planning manager, he says, well, if it's not broken, you don't have to fix it. Well, I don't necessarily think that it's broken, but I think that it's got a rusty paint job, and it's the rear view mirror is missing, and you know, maybe there's maybe a door or some hubcaps gone. I mean, I just think tidying up and housekeeping is all that we really need to do. And just focus on things and be honest and say this is an issue and we have to deal with it, and just kind of go through things. So just to tidy it up and pull it all together at the same time. That's what an architect likes to do. They like to pull everything together at the same time. So.
You're happy to be in the job?
Yes, I am. Like I told you, there was only one day I didn't want to go back.
That's right. Why don't you explain what that one day was?
I don't even remember what it was. I thought, I just don't want to go back. But I did.
Any other questions? Steve, do you have something?
Just a quick question. Who are the major collaborators? Both the people, the citizens, but you're also part, you deal with lots of governments presumably, and other community organizations and maybe state organizations. Can you talk just a little bit about collaboration? Well,
you know, some of the committees, that's one of the ways that we collaborate, if you picked up on that, on the slides. And then whenever there's an opportunity to do so, I mean, one of the things about the Carlsberg UGA area is there's a lot of property there that isn't being served right now with water. There's going to be sewer all through the Carlsberg UGA, but no water in quite a bit of the area. So, you know, we've reached out to the PUD, reached out to Ecology, reached out to the Water Trust to try to get water there. So we're making headway, again slowly, but we're making headway, because if you're going to have sewer, you need to have water, because people want to build higher densities. So.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mariam. Thank you very, very much. Our speaker next week, by the way, is the project manager from the Magnus Pacific Corporation, a friend of Young's there. He's going to be talking about the local impacts from the $20 million city landfill project. So that should be a fellow. He's coming all the way from Montana to tell us about that. Anyway, our thanks to Art, Bruce. Can we go? How do we turn this up or something? Yeah, turn a little bit more here. I think it's, yeah. Yeah, we got our engineer here.
Now.
Are you sure it's on?
There you go. Yeah, it's on. There you go. Right now, see if that's on.
You have to hold it right up to your mouth.
Oh, there we are. There we are.
Jenna's just going.
Okay. All right. Thank you for having me here today. And when John asked me to speak, he asked me to talk about the changes that I've made in the department. And so what I thought I would do is just give you an overview and maybe talk about the front page of the newspaper. Let's see.
I was just doing that. A short order in here.
Okay. So most of you know about the Home Rule Charter. That's our county constitution, and in November 2002, it was amended to make the Community Development Director an elected position. And I'm the fourth of a 4-year term. So here's the organizational chart of the department, and one of the first changes that I did make in the kind of integrate the changes in the program. I was going to tell you a little bit about myself, but John has already done that, so I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so all or most of you know that this is an elected position. And have you ever asked yourself, what does it mean to be an elected official? Well, I had to ask myself that about 2 years ago. And thank goodness the state of Washington has a newly elected official conference. In 4 days, it's all you need to know about being an elected official. However, they didn't have a session for community development directors, but they had sessions for auditors, coroners, treasurers, prosecuting attorneys, and commissioners, but no DCD sessions. So they put me in with the commissioners, which really made a lot of sense because a lot of the questions I get are the same questions that other commissioners in other counties get because so many people are interested in land use, and that's where a lot of conflicts come up. We learned about public process, public records, marijuana, legal guidelines, strategic planning, and my favorite, appearance of fairness, how to stay off the
in the 2014 elections, a challenger against the incumbent. A graduate of Mississippi State University. She is a 24-year resident of Clallam County. Most of those years spent as a business owner, as an architect. And as an architect, she completed more than 250 projects in this county, with about 65% of those being private homes. Anyway, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Mary Ellen Winborn.